Hola a todos, soy Javier Poveda y esto es De Bien TV, el canal en el que te lo vas a pasar de bien mientras aprendes geografía, historia e historia del arte. El vídeo de hoy va dirigido a mis alumnos de primero de la ESO de sección de Elies Niel Armstrong de Valdemoro. So today we are going to continue studying the climates and the landscapes of the world, and in the previous unit we studied the temperate ones, and this time we are going to see about the extreme ones. So let's go to the presentation and make some magic. Okay, here we are, and let's start the Unit 7, Extreme Climates and Landscapes. Here you have some photographs of some of these extreme landscapes we are going to visit. So let's start with the first one, which is the equatorial climate. This one is found in areas near the equator, as its name says. So we can find it here in the Amazon basin, in some parts of Central America, and in the Congo, which is this area of Central Africa, the coast of the Gulf of Guinea, and also in Southeast Asia, mostly in this island, this archipelago, which is the Indonesian one. So here we have also some climate graphs. This one from Singapore, which is a city located here, where I am pointing with the mouse, and also here in Iquitos in Peru, which is more or less around this area. So as you can see here in the climate graphs, in these regions with equatorial climates, the temperature are always very high, and they are around more or less 25 degrees centigrade. As you can see here in the lines, in the red lines of the temperatures, they are between 20 and 30, so they are around more or less 25 degrees and barely vary all year long. So they vary just a little bit. The thermal amplitude therefore is very small. It is usually less than 5 degrees. Remember that the thermal amplitude is the difference between the highest and the lowest temperature that is registered in a year. And then talking about precipitation, we can see that rainfall is very heavy. So the sum of all the precipitations is usually above or over 1,500 millimeters per year at least, okay? Because usually it is over 2,000, and we will see climates in which the precipitation is even over 3,000 millimeters. Why is this? Because the evaporation is so intense and the level of humidity is so high that even a small drop, a fall in the temperature at dusk, at the evening, can cause torrential rain. The torrential rain, if you remember from the previous unit, it's a rain that lasts a very short time, but it is very intense. That is a torrential rain, una lluvia torrencial. So let's see some of the landscapes of these equatorial climates. Let's start with the natural ones. So we have to know that because of the persistent rain, remember, all year long, the rivers in these regions are among the highest flowing and the most regular on Earth. So they are the ones that carries the most water in all of the rivers of the planet. And they are also the most regular because they carry the same amount of water, more or less, all year long, throughout the whole year. Okay, this is because it rains almost every day. So this rainwater carries fine soil into the river. Soil are the particles of the ground. So this gives the rivers this permanent brown color. For example, you can see here in this picture in the middle. The vegetation is lush, lush means frondoso, and varied, especially evergreen trees. Remember, the evergreen trees are the ones who don't lose their leaves in autumn. And this is because the high temperatures and the heavy rainfall. And this type of vegetation is called rainforest. This and this is rainforest. Or in the case of Asia, it is called jungle. So rainforest is this. In Spanish, we call it selva. And jungle, la jungla, is this one, which is very similar to this one, but in America and Africa, it is called rainforest. selva, and in Asia it is called jungle, la jungla. So rainforests are the most biologically rich and diverse environments on the planet. This means that there are a lot of many different species, even millions of species or thousands of species within the same biome. And this vegetation grows at different levels of stages in altitude depending on the light requirements of each plant. This is why there are few species on the ground and many growing toward the sunlight. As you can see here, many trees, they are very tall because they are looking for the sunlight. And the top of the trees doesn't allow the sunlight to reach the soil, the ground. So most of the species are located they are very tall trees, or they even live at the top of the trees, okay? And there are very few on the ground. And now let's take a look at the humanized equatorial landscapes. And in these areas, the indigenous peoples who inhabit the major rainforests in America and Africa survive by gathering fruit, by hunting, and by practicing a subsistence agriculture. They are more or less like the Paleolithic peoples that we studied at the beginning of the course, okay? And subsistence agriculture means that they cultivate the amount enough only to survive, okay? They don't, they cannot have how do you say this? I cannot find the word. Okay, they only cultivate the food which is needed to eat, okay? They cannot sell the rest because there is no rest. So the population density is low and they live far from each other, okay? The tribes live separated from each other and far from each other. And in contrast, the equatorial regions of Asia are more densely populated, and the Asian rainforests are getting smaller as land is cleared to cultivate rice, which is the main food they eat in Asia, sugarcane, tea, and rubber tree plantations. Son los árboles del caucho. And moreover, in some cases, big cities have developed, like Singapore. For example, this is Singapore, in which the city is how do you say this, is built in the jungle, okay? They have cleared the rainforest and they have built a city, a modern city there. And some trees growing in the rainforests are very appreciated for their wood because they are very luxury woods, and they are used to make, for example, furniture such as ebony or mahogany. Ebony es el ébano, mahogany es la caoba. So they are often cut down. And now let's go to the next climate, which is the tropical one. The tropical climate is located, as its name says, around the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn. Okay, the Tropic of Cancer is the one, is this discontinuous line in the northern hemisphere, and the Tropic of Capricorn is this one in the southern hemisphere. So here you have another two examples, Darwin in Australia, which is more or less over here, and Bamako, which is in Mali, which is more or less here next to Banfora. So in tropical regions, the temperatures are high all year long, as well as in the equatorial ones, and the thermal amplitude is very narrow, okay? The difference is small, but it is slightly bigger than in the equatorial ones, but this time it is less than 10 degrees the difference between the highest and the lowest temperature. As you can see here, you can see a little curve here, okay? It is not a line, but it makes a bit of a curve here, okay? Here you can see it better. But however, the main difference is in the precipitation, because the rains mark two different seasons. The wet season, which is usually in summer, and the dry season, which is in winter, okay? As you can see here, Here in this climate graph, the months in which the precipitation is higher are the months of summer, which are January, February, and March. Remember that Australia here is in the southern hemisphere, so the summer is in January, February, and March. Here, Bamako, which is in the northern hemisphere, the summer is in June, July, and August, and September. So this is the wet season. And the rest, the dry season, is here, the winter here, and the winter here. Okay? And the regions which are furthest, okay, furthest from the equator have the longest dry seasons. Let's take a look at the landscapes, and in these tropical landscapes, the river flows vary greatly throughout the year. Why? Because of the precipitation. During the dry season, the rivers carry very little water. Why? Because there is no rain. But in the rainy season, they overflow. The water goes away from the riverbed, okay? Se desborda. And sometimes cause flooding, inundaciones. So tropical forests are found in the regions closest to the equator. This is a tropical forest here on the top left. The vegetation is similar to that of rainforests, although is less varied with more widely spaced trees. The trees are not located so close to each other. The forest is denser along tropical rivers and the top of the trees touch to form gallery forest. A gallery forest is a forest which goes along a river, okay? We have a river and we have trees alongside the river banks. So it is like a gallery, a corridor of trees. However, the most common landscape is the savanna, okay? This is a savanna, this one, with the antelopes and the lion king, which has many grasses, this is a grass, and shrubs, arbustos, like these ones. Trees are scarce, they are very few, and they grow in small groups or dispersed throughout the plain. Here you have a single tree and a single tree and a single tree. They are separated from each other, they are isolated. And during the wet season, the vegetation remains green and lush, frondosa. But when the dry season arrives, the plants dry out and fires are common. Further from the equator, if we go away from the equator, where the wet season is shorter, the vegetation is made up of thorny shrubs, arbustos espinosos, and areas of bare soil or empty soil with no vegetation. And here the savanna becomes the steppe. Okay, this is an example of steppe with my little friend the elephant. So the humanized landscapes, in these ones, some indigenous people of the savannah, for example, such as the Maasai in Kenya or in Tanzania, they keep animals and practice extensive livestock farming. Okay, they have animals with them and they graze the land. However, there's a problem because a very dry season followed by delayed rains, they are away in time, okay, retrasadas, can lead to famine, okay, hambruna. Other inhabitants of the savanna practice agriculture and some populations live in villages and practice crop rotation. This is a village, an indigenous village, and crop rotation means that not the same crop is cultivated in the same land every year, okay? In one year, if you have, for example, two parts of the land, in this land you cultivate wheat, for example, and in this one you cultivate nothing. And the next year, the other way around. In the land that in the previous year you cultivated wheat, it is left to rest. Okay, and in the one that rested the year before, it is cultivated this time. This is because the soil gets empty of nutrients, okay, and so they need to replenish. Alongside traditional agriculture, there are extensive plantations dedicated to the cultivation of crops. These ones are plantations. Plantations are very, very, very extensive and big and large surface of cultivation, okay? And in these plantations, they cultivate crops such as coffee, tea, cocoa, tobacco, and pineapple, and many more, okay? For example, This one is a coffee plantation and this one is a tea plantation. And these plantations can alter the traditional vegetation, agriculture, and mostly the landscape. As you can see, this to get this land to cultivate, they had to cut down all the vegetation that was there before. So they alter a lot the landscape. For example, you can see this one. This is not a natural landscape. And that's it for the tropical. Now let's take a look, a very quick look to the special style or type of tropical climate, which is the monsoon climate. The monsoon is a type of seasonal wind, okay? It's a wind, the monsoon, in Spanish, el monzón. And they can cause very high precipitation up to 12,000 millimeters a year. 12,000 is a lot. Okay, look at these climate graphs and look at these precipitation bars, which they have values up to 340 millimeters for a month. This is a lot of rain. And they can cause very high precipitation and severe flooding. The monsoon climate has a constant temperature, a more or less constant temperature throughout the year, and heavy but irregular rainfall with two periods, the dry and the wet season. And this is a climate which is typical from the southeast of Asia. Okay, so the monsoon climate is a tropical climate pardon, but a very extreme dry type of tropical climate, okay? It has a very wet season. So monsoon winds are caused by a change in wind direction in winter and summer. This leads to changes in temperature and precipitation. Why? Because in winter, the surface of Central Asia is colder than the waters, with no capital letter, and here an H is missing, as usual, of the Indian Ocean, which is this, el Índico, and the monsoons blow from the land towards the ocean carrying cool, dry, with no rain air. Okay, these are the winter monsoons or dry seasons. This one, these red arrows are the winter monsoons. But in summer, the surface of the land is hotter than the ocean, so the warm, moist, with humidity, winds blow from the ocean towards the continent. These are the blue arrows, and they can cause heavy rainfall. Well, they actually cause heavy rainfall, and these are the summer monsoons or wet monsoons. And rice cultivation, here this is a guy from Mortal Kombat cultivating rice, which is fundamental for Asia. In the Western lands, the fundamental crop is wheat. In Asia is the rice. And it is tied to this special type of climate because rice needs a lot of water to grow. It actually grows underwater. So it is sown. Remember when we talk about Egypt, sown, when you put the seed in the ground. So in June, when the summer monsoon arrives, and it is harvest in October when the monsoon ends. So let's go to the hot desert climate. The hot deserts or deserts are found in various parts of the world and vary according to the climate and topographic relief features of the area. Some hot deserts are located in areas near the tropics, like the Sahara Desert, which is this one in North Africa. The coastal deserts are formed when a cold marine current, and remember the ocean currents, passes close to the coast. The cold water does not evaporate easily and the air is dry, which results in low rainfall. So since the water is cold, it does not evaporate, it does not form clouds, so therefore there is no rain. Examples of coastal deserts include Atacama Desert, which is here in Chile, the Namib, which is here in South Africa, and the Great Sandy Desert, which is here in Australia. And finally, the inland deserts are located in areas isolated from the influence of the sea, so in the interior lands, due to the high mountain range. For example, the Gobi Desert here, which is isolated by the Himalaya, and the West Central North America Desert, which is isolated by the Rocky Mountains. So here you have two examples of desert climate. Here, this one in Adrar, Argelia, which is this point here, and this one in Almeria. It's like a soft, hot desert climate, but it is a desert climate, which they have in Almeria. So in these climates, the temperature range within the day, okay, within the day, during the day, is very big. It means that during sunlight in the morning or at noon, the temperatures are very high, but at night, at midnight, for example, the temperatures are very low. So the difference between the temperature during the night and during the day is very big. And the average temperatures are lower than in equatorial and tropical climates. The average, okay? Not the highest nor the lowest, but the average. Yet they are still high, okay? They are lower, but they are still high. And rainfall is very irregular and very scarce, very little rainfall, below 250 millimeters a year. And they are also usually 9 arid months at least. Remember that we can see that a month is arid when the precipitation bar in the climate graph is below the line of temperatures. For example, in this one, the 12 months are arid, are very arid actually, and in Almeria, they have 9 arid months. They are all arid except January, March, and December. Okay? So let's take a look at the landscapes and the natural landscapes. We can see that because of the lack of rainfall and the dry air, which causes water to evaporate quickly, there are no permanent water courses. There are no rivers. In some deserts, somehow there are wadis. Wadis are riverbeds, lechos del río, that remain dry for most of the year. Okay, and they only carry water when it rains. For example, here you have a wadi. Look, as you can see here, water have passed from alongside this course some at some time, okay, but not now. And well, they are called wadis because it's an Arab word, but in Spain, actually, we have some of these, and we call it ramblas. So very few plants grow in the desert because of the lack of water, and those that do have adapted to the harsh conditions, condiciones duras. Okay, they have small leaves to reduce transpiration. Remember transpiration from the water cycle, which allows them to conserve the water, the few water that they retain. And finally, the geological activity, the wind and the altitude create different type of deserts. Not all the deserts are the same. The most common desert is covered in sand and characterized by dunes. This one, for example, is a sand desert and it is called erg. The other type of deserts combine sand, stone, and rock. It's a rocky desert, if you want to name it like that, and it is called reg, which is this one here on the top right of your screen. So the humanized desert landscape looks like this, because deserts are scarcely populated, very few populated, with nomadic herdsmen, pastores, living on the edges, on the limits. Okay, their goats and camels graze, eat grass on the scarce vegetation found on the steppe, and the nomads move around in search of places where it has rained and there are underground sources of water. This is a nomad camp with the camels, okay, for example. We have also sedentary populations in deserts who live near oases. Okay, oasis is the plural, oasis is the singular. Rare places where water from the underground streams, corrientes, rises to the surface through springs, manantiales, and wells, pozos. Okay, for example, this is an oasis, and here we have some houses. And in certain countries, mostly in the Middle East, in the Arab Peninsula, oil has made it possible with two S's, to finance new construction techniques and materials with no E, another mistake, to improve comfort, and these places have adapted well to desert life. That these countries, since they have a lot of money, they can't afford to build this type of cities. This is, for example, Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates, in the Arab Peninsula. And finally, we are going to end this unit with the polar and high mountain climates, which we are going to see together. So the polar climates, as its name says, are found at the opposite ends of the Earth, north of the Arctic Cycle, okay, this area here, and south of the Antarctic Cycle, which is this line here in Antarctica. And high mountain climates are located in great mountain ranges, generally with altitudes above 1500 meters, okay, or 1500 meters, which is the same. For example, the Andes, the Rocky Mountains, the Himalaya, etc. etc. So here you have an example of polar climate in Thule or Thule, or I don't know how to say this, in Greenland, which is this place here, and in the Pyrenees in Spain, in La Molina. So let's take a look first to the polar one. The Arctic and Antarctic, Arctic here, Antarctic here, are two of the coldest regions of the planet. Why? Because of the steep inclinado angle of the sun's rays and the low level of insolation. Remember of insolation, the amount of solar energy that reaches a place. So if it is perpendicular to the surface, it hits the surface more than if it is steep angle, okay? Remember that when we saw this in class. So temperatures are low throughout the year. Look at the temperature line, which is mostly below zero, and they only surpass zero in 3 or 4 months a year. For example, in this place, only in June, July, and August. It is above 0 degrees here. Okay, precipitation is generally scarce, is very few, and during the winter as snowflakes. And then here in the high mountain regions, the temperatures are low all year long, also not that low like in the polar climates, but still low, even though in summer they can reach between 15 and 20 degrees centigrade on average, okay? As you can see here, in summer the temperatures are way higher than in winter. Precipitation is abundant and mostly concentrated in the summer. So let's look at the polar, natural and humanized landscapes. The polar landscapes are almost always covered with a thick gresa ice sheet and referred as cold deserts. In summer, in the ice-free land, the land with no ice, it is known as tundra, which is this. This is an example of tundra. This is covered with mosses, musgos, lichens, lichenes, and small flowers. It grows only in North America, Asia, and Europe, okay? And because of the underground being permanently frozen, let it go, permanently frozen, which is called the permafrost. The permafrost is the ice which is underground and which is permanently frozen, okay? Can't hold it back anymore. So no trees are grown. Why? Because the roots of the trees, the roots, las raíces, cannot penetrate the ground, okay? Because there is ice. In regions closest to the poles, there is no vegetation at all because everything is ice. The tundra has traditionally been inhabited by the Inuit in America and the Sami in Europe and Asia, who are hunting and fishing communities. We know them in Spanish. The Inuit are the Esquimales and the Sami are the Lapones. In some areas, like Greenland or Alaska, small settlements can be found, like this one here, close to the sea because they fish, and with houses painted in many colors, as you can see, blue, red, and orange, yellow, okay? They are dedicated to fishing, to the oil extraction because there is petroleum underground in the Arctic areas, and sometimes tourism. And now let's go to the high mountain natural and humanized landscapes. The high mountain vegetation varies depending on latitude, altitude, and orientation. Orientation means which hillside is of the two that a mountain has, it has, depending on which hillside we are, the vegetation is different, okay? In a same mountain, here you have some type of vegetation and here you have another type, okay? That's the orientation. In all cases, vegetation is distributed in zones of different altitude. So the vegetation is not the same at the bottom of the mountain than that in the top of the mountain, okay? They have like floors, like if it was a building of vegetation. So in the lower zones of the valleys, we can find agriculture and meadows, remember the meadows, for the livestock, like for example, this part here. Then, as the altitude increases, as we go up to the mountain, we observe in this order, we can find mixed forest, I don't know what I'm saying, deciduous forest, high mountain meadows, the ones you can see in Haiti, and finally at the top we have perpetual snow, that is snow that never melts because it is located so high that it is cold all year long and it never melts, and sometimes glaciers. So the inhabitants of these regions are mostly dedicated to livestock farming, to forest exploitation, for example the cutting, and hydroelectric power production. Since they are very steep areas, they can take advantage of this and produce electricity with dams and reservoirs. Agriculture is concentrated specifically at the bottom of the valleys, okay, the most plain areas, and also in this landscape it is common to see tourist activities such as snow sports like skiing and mountain climbing, which are increasingly popular in these regions. So many ski resorts have been built, for example here, in which one you can ski, look at the, I don't know how to say this in English, la pista, and which are changing enormously the landscape. So this is all for this unit, and what we want you to do this week is the following. Remember that we learned how to comment a photograph of a landscape in the previous unit, so I want you to follow the same steps: observation, identification, and analysis, and to comment each one of these 4 pictures, okay? 1, 2, 3, and 4, okay? Remember to identify if it is a humanized or natural landscape or which part is predominant, to identify all the elements that you see in the photograph, and finally to analyze all of them and determine what is the main economic activity and how is the habitat, and mostly, the most important, you have to deduct which climate it is. You have to guess which climate it is, the one in each of the landscapes. Don't forget it. So you have to do this to comment these 4 pictures, and I also want you to complete the rest of the summary charts we are missing, okay, which are the ones with the climates we have studied in this unit. You have to make these summary charts following the example that I gave you in the previous unit with the Mediterranean climate, and you have to do this with these characteristics: the name, the location, temperature, precipitation, landscapes, and the climate chart. In this part, in the climate chart, you can just draw it a little bit, okay? So when you are in front of a climate graph and you don't know which climate it corresponds to, you can take a look at your charts and you can see which climate chart it is similar to. So you have to do this with the equatorial, tropical, the hot deserts, the polar, and the high mountain climates, okay? And that's all for these climates. And that's all also for the unit. So let's make some magic again. Na 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 na. Here we are. Let it go. So this is all for this unit. We have studied all the types of climates and all the types of landscapes which are associated to them. Y con esto termino en inglés. Espero que este vídeo os haya ayudado a entender un poquito mejor el tema. Muchas gracias por verlo y nos vemos en el próximo.